Hey guys, welcome back to this channel, The Voice of the Past. In this video, we will unfold the untold story of the Carlisle family's hidden vault, a secret worth killing for. Before continuing, if you are new into this channel, please consider subscribing to this channel. Let's start. The rain hammered relentlessly against the stained glass windows of Carlisle Manor, a brooding monolith perched atop the jagged cliffs of Blackmoor. Wind howled through the twisted oaks lining the gravel driveway, their gnarled branches clawing at the sky like desperate hands. The manor itself, its towering stone walls covered in ivy, loomed over the landscape, a relic of a forgotten era. Ethan Calloway hesitated before stepping out of his car, gripping the wax-sealed letter that had summoned him here. The damp, yellowed parchment carried a message that had been unsettling from the moment he received it. You are invited to the reading of the last will and testament of Lord Gregory Carlisle. Attendance is mandatory. Time: 7 p.m. Location: Carlisle Manor. Ethan had no connection to the Carlisle family, yet here he was, his curiosity outweighing his better judgment. The Carlyles were one of England's oldest and wealthiest bloodlines, their fortune built on shipping, trade, and, if whispers were to be believed, more illicit dealings. The hidden vault had been an obsession for decades, but no one had ever found it. As he crossed the threshold, an immediate chill settled in his bones. The grand foyer was dimly lit, the flickering chandelier casting eerie, shifting shadows across the walls. The scent of aged wood, dust, and something faintly metallic lingered in the air. "Sir," a voice croaked. Ethan turned to find a frail, aging butler standing stiffly by the entrance. His hollow eyes seemed to absorb the dim candlelight, his pallid skin stretched thin over his gaunt face. "Mr. Calloway?" Ethan nodded. "Right this way." The butler led him down a long hallway, lined with faded portraits of long-dead Carlyles. Their painted eyes seemed to follow him, their expressions dark and unreadable. Something about this place felt wrong. The Parlor of Shadows. As Ethan entered the parlor, the atmosphere thickened with tension. A roaring fire in the stone hearth barely seemed to warm the space. 4 others were already seated, their gazes flickering toward him, some with curiosity, others with veiled hostility. Seated on an emerald green velvet chair was Victoria Carlisle, the estranged niece of the deceased. Her dark auburn hair was pulled into a severe bun, her lips pursed as she examined the room with an air of detached calculation. Ethan had read about her, an investigative journalist who had exposed corporate corruption, including that of her own family. Beside her sat Arthur Kane, a lawyer known for handling the affairs of the wealthy and powerful. His pinstripe suit was immaculate, his expression unreadable behind his round spectacles. His fingers tapped against a thick leather folder on his lap, the will presumably. Next was Eleanor Winters, an antiques dealer with a reputation for acquiring rare and sometimes stolen artifacts. She was the only one who looked genuinely unsettled, her gloved hands fidgeting in her lap, her hazel eyes darting around the room as if expecting something, or someone, to emerge from the shadows. And finally, Henry Carlisle, the last known heir, reclined in an armchair, a glass of scotch in his hand. His presence was unnerving, not because he was particularly intimidating, but because he radiated a casual arrogance, as if he already knew how this night would end. "Wonderful," Henry muttered as Ethan took a seat, another scavenger in the lion's den. Before Ethan could respond, Arthur Kane cleared his throat. "Now that we are all here, we shall begin." He reached into the folder, retrieving an envelope sealed with the Carlisle family crest. The room fell into a thick silence. "Lord Gregory Carlisle's final wish," Arthur announced, his voice smooth and controlled. is that you all partake in one final challenge. The hidden vault exists, and only the most worthy shall inherit its contents. A collective gasp filled the room. Ethan's grip on the armrest tightened. Find the vault, Arthur continued, and the riches of the Carlisle family will be yours. Fail, and you walk away with nothing. Ethan felt a shift in the air, a crackling tension that hadn't been there before. He wasn't the only one who noticed it. Eleanor's breath hitched. Victoria's gaze darkened. Even Henry straightened slightly in his seat. This wasn't just about money. This was a game. And Ethan had the sinking feeling that someone in this room was willing to kill to win. The fire crackled in the grand parlor, but it did nothing to warm the tension in the room. Ethan studied the others, watching how their expressions shifted after Arthur Kane's announcement. A game, a treasure hunt, a prize worth killing for. Arthur adjusted his glasses and continued, his voice steady and emotionless. Lord Gregory has left behind a series of clues hidden throughout the manor. The first will be revealed now. The rest you must find on your own. He pulled out a second envelope, breaking the wax seal before unfolding a brittle sheet of paper. He read aloud. In the heart of this house where the past does dwell, a tale of betrayal the paintings do tell. Find the one who was cast aside, behind their gaze, the next clue hides. A hush fell over the room. The words carried an eerie weight, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Eleanor was the first to speak. It's referring to a painting, Victoria scoffed. Obviously. But which one? There must be dozens. Ethan's mind raced. The Carlisle family had a long and bloody history. Betrayal, power struggles, mysterious deaths. If the clue hinted at someone who had been cast aside, it could be an ancestor who had been exiled or disinherited. We should check the portrait hall, Henry said, swirling his scotch lazily. It's where they immortalize the most controversial members of the family. Convenient, Victoria muttered. A hall full of backstabbing ghosts. Arthur sighed. Very well, you may begin. He gestured to the door, making it clear that they were now on their own. Ethan stood, casting one last glance at the lawyer. You're not coming with us? Arthur gave a thin smile. I only reveal what is necessary. The rest is up to you. The hunt begins. The five of them moved down the dimly lit hallway, their footsteps echoing against the marble floors. Ornate candelabras lined the walls, casting long, wavering shadows. Ethan kept an eye on the others as they walked. None of them trusted each other. That much was clear. The portrait hall loomed ahead, its massive oak doors groaning as Henry pushed them open. Inside, rows of portraits stretched along the walls, their subjects frozen in time, each bearing a striking resemblance to someone in the room. Victoria's eyes flicked toward an older portrait of a man with piercing blue eyes, his expression cold and calculating. That's my grandfather. Ethan examined the paintings carefully, searching for something that matched the clue. Find the one who was cast aside. Then he saw it. A torn painting. Unlike the others, this one had been vandalized. The canvas sliced through the middle. Only the subject's eyes remained intact, staring out from the ruined artwork. Henry exhaled sharply. That's Edmund Carlisle, my great-uncle. What happened to him? Eleanor asked. He was banished, Henry replied, accused of betraying the family. No one speaks of him anymore. Victoria stepped closer. If this is the one, the next clue is behind the eyes. Ethan reached forward, running his fingers along the frame. Then he felt it, a small indentation behind the painted eyes. He pressed. A soft click echoed through the silent room. Suddenly, a compartment behind the painting popped open, revealing an old folded note. Ethan carefully unfolded it. The paper was fragile, the ink faded but still legible. Those who seek fortune must first descend, below where the lost souls end, a door of iron, a key of bone, face the dark, or leave alone. A shiver ran down Ethan's spine. The crypt, Eleanor whispered. Henry's smirk faded. This just got a lot more interesting. Victoria crossed her arms. And a lot more dangerous. Ethan clenched his jaw. This wasn't just a game, it was a test, and the stakes were higher than any of them realized. The group stood in uneasy silence, the newly discovered clue hanging in the air like a ghostly whisper. Below, where the lost souls end. There was no question about what it meant. The Carlisle Crypt. Ethan exchanged a glance with Eleanor, who looked more unsettled than before. "You've been to the crypt before?" he asked. She hesitated before nodding. "Once, years ago. It's beneath the east wing, accessible through a passage in the old chapel." Victoria let out a slow breath. "We should be careful. Old crypts have a way of keeping their secrets. And they're dead." Henry scoffed, though he didn't look as confident as before. "It's just a crypt. Let's go." With nothing more to say, the five of them made their way through the grand halls of Carlisle Manor, the flickering candle sconces casting eerie shadows along the walls. The chapel's secret. The chapel was as old as the manor itself, its stone walls covered in creeping ivy and dust-laden tapestries. Moonlight filtered through the stained glass windows, casting splashes of red, blue, and gold across the cold floor. At the far end stood an altar of black marble, behind which loomed a weathered stone arch. A heavy iron gate, half rusted with time, blocked the passage downward. Ethan tested it. Locked. "Of course it is," Victoria muttered. Eleanor studied the clue again. "A key of bone. That must be literal." Henry rolled his eyes. "So we just find some old skeleton and hope it has a key?" Ethan thought for a moment. Then something clicked. He turned toward a row of ancient wooden pews, each carved with intricate patterns. One, however, bore something different, a skeletal figure holding a key. He ran his hands along the carving, feeling for any movement. With a sudden snap, a compartment in the pew opened, revealing a small key made of ivory. Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Clever." Ethan slid the bone key into the iron gate's lock. Click. The rusted bars groaned as he pushed the gate open, revealing a spiraling stone staircase leading into pitch-black darkness. A damp, musty scent wafted upward, laced with something metallic. The scent of old blood. The crypt below. Their footsteps echoed ominously as they descended. The air grew colder, the flickering candlelight barely pushing back the suffocating blackness. At the base of the stairs, the crypt opened up into a vaulted chamber lined with stone tombs and ancient carvings. Some of the sarcophagi bore names long forgotten, their lids covered in dust and cobwebs. Eleanor shuddered. "I don't like this." Victoria held up the clue again. A door of iron. Ethan turned, his gaze sweeping across the chamber. Then he saw it. At the far end, barely visible in the candlelight, stood a massive iron door. It was embedded into the stone wall, its surface covered in strange symbols. Henry reached for the handle. It didn't budge. "Of course it's locked," he grumbled. "Where's the next damn key?" Ethan approached the door, examining the carvings. One stood out, a Carlisle crest with an inscription below it. The words were worn, but he could make out a single phrase. "Blood to blood, the door shall yield." Eleanor's breath hitched. "You've got to be kidding." Henry cursed under his breath. "We need blood?" Ethan pulled out a small pocket knife. "Looks like it." Without hesitation, he sliced a shallow cut across his palm, pressing his hand against the cold iron. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deep groan, the door unlocked. The metal creaked as it slowly swung open, revealing a passage beyond, one lined with skulls embedded into the walls. The air inside was thick, oppressive, as if something was watching them. Victoria exhaled. Well, that's inviting. Ethan tightened his grip on his knife. No turning back now. And with that, they stepped forward, into the unknown. The iron door groaned shut behind them, sealing the group in near-complete darkness. The flickering candlelight barely illuminated the narrow passage ahead, the walls lined with human skulls embedded in the stone. Shadows stretched and twisted as they moved forward, each step accompanied by the damp echo of their footsteps. Ethan tightened his grip on his knife. The air was thick, heavy with something unseen, a presence that made his skin crawl. "We shouldn't be here," Eleanor whispered. Victoria shot her a sharp look. "We came for the vault. We're not leaving without it." Henry, ever arrogant, chuckled. "What's the matter? Afraid the dead will wake up?" Ethan ignored them, focusing on the passage ahead. The walls were lined with ancient engravings, symbols of the Carlisle family, interwoven with cryptic Latin inscriptions. Some were faded, eroded by time, but one stood out, freshly carved into the stone. "Only the worthy shall pass. The unworthy shall perish." Ethan exhaled, a warning. The trial of the vault. After several minutes of silent walking, the passage widened into an underground chamber. In its center stood a massive stone pedestal, atop which lay an ornate golden chest encrusted with rubies. "The vault," Henry breathed, stepping forward. "Wait," Ethan warned, but it was too late. As Henry's hand touched the chest, a low rumbling shook the ground. Dust rained from the ceiling, and suddenly the floor beneath them cracked open. Eleanor screamed as the room shifted, ancient mechanisms activating after centuries of stillness. Trap doors snapped open, and the group barely managed to scramble back as sections of the floor collapsed into darkness. A new passage revealed itself, a corridor lined with statues of hooded figures, their stone faces twisted in silent judgment. Another inscription loomed overhead. Blood, trust, and sacrifice. The price of passage. Ethan exchanged a glance with Victoria. "This isn't just about finding the vault," he said grimly. "It's a test." Henry scowled. "So what? We've passed every test so far. Let's just keep moving." Eleanor hesitated. "But what kind of sacrifice does it mean?" Nobody answered. There was only one way to find out. The price of passage. As they stepped into the corridor, the statues loomed over them, their stone hands clutching rusted daggers. The air grew even colder, and with every step, Ethan felt a strange pressure building, as if something was pushing down on them, watching them. Halfway through the corridor, the ground suddenly trembled. The statues moved. Stone arms jerked to life, and one of the statues lunged, swiping its blade toward Eleanor. She barely dodged, letting out a sharp cry. "They're alive!" she shrieked. "No, they react to movement," Ethan shouted. Victoria froze. "Then how do we get through?" Ethan's eyes flickered to the inscription again. Trust, sacrifice, blood. He exhaled sharply. "We have to walk forward, without flinching. If we show fear, we fail." "That's insane," Henry snapped. "Then stay here," Ethan shot back. Without another word, he took a slow, deliberate step forward. The nearest statue twitched, its blade hovering inches from his throat, but it didn't strike. Another step, then another. The others watched, wide-eyed, as Ethan carefully made his way across the corridor, his movements steady, fearless. Victoria went next, her steps measured, her breathing controlled. Eleanor hesitated, trembling, but forced herself to move. Henry, finally understanding, followed. One by one they passed, until Henry faltered. Halfway through he lost control, his nerves snapping as he instinctively flinched. The nearest statue struck. A flash of steel, blood splattered against the stone. Henry cried out, clutching his arm as a deep gash ran from his shoulder down to his wrist. He staggered forward, barely making it through as the statues froze once more. Panting, he glared at Ethan. "You could have warned me." "I did," Ethan muttered, eyeing the wound. "You just didn't listen." Victoria turned her attention forward. "We're close. Let's keep moving." The final door beyond the corridor, a final chamber awaited. At its center stood an imposing door of black stone, lined with ancient golden runes. In its center, a blood-red gemstone pulsed faintly, as if alive. Below it, an inscription read, "Only the blood of Carlisle may open this door." Silence fell over the group. Eleanor exhaled. "Henry, it has to be you." Henry's face was pale, his wound still bleeding. "You mean I have to—" Victoria tossed him a dagger. "It's your family's legacy. Either you claim it, or we turn back." Henry hesitated. Then, gritting his teeth, he pressed his bloodied hand against the stone. The gemstone flashed, and with a thunderous boom, the ancient door began to open. Beyond it, bathed in the golden glow of untouched riches, lay the legendary Carlisle Vault. The door rumbled open, revealing the legendary Carlisle Vault bathed in an eerie golden glow. Inside, the air was thick with dust, untouched for centuries. Piles of gold coins, gemstones, and antique treasures filled the vast chamber, reflecting the dim light in dazzling hues. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with ancient tomes, maps, and relics of forgotten power. Henry staggered forward, still clutching his injured arm. His eyes widened with greed. "We found it," he whispered. "The Carlisle fortune." Eleanor, breathless, reached out to touch a chest overflowing with gold ingots. Victoria, however, remained wary. Ethan followed her gaze toward the center of the chamber. There, on a raised stone pedestal, lay a single black box, locked with intricate silver chains. Unlike the rest of the vault, this object seemed wrong. A sense of unease settled over him. "This is what Gregory really wanted us to find," Victoria muttered. Ethan nodded. "It's not just about the money." Henry scoffed. "Who cares? We're rich. Take what you want. This is ours now." But Ethan wasn't listening. His eyes remained on the black box. Something about it called to him, like an unsolved puzzle demanding to be opened. Carefully, he reached forward and touched the silver chains. A whisper echoed through the vault. Eleanor gasped. "Did you hear that?" Before Ethan could respond, the torches lining the walls flickered wildly. The air grew colder, and a sudden, unnatural wind rushed through the vault. Then, the door behind them slammed shut. A curse unleashed. Henry spun around. "What the hell was that?" "The vault is alive," Eleanor whispered. Victoria cursed under her breath. Gregory knew this wasn't just about money. She turned to Ethan. "Open the box." Ethan hesitated, but then nodded. He undid the silver chains, his fingers trembling. As the last link fell away, the box clicked open. Inside lay a single parchment, old and brittle, with a message written in faded ink. "The true wealth of the Carlisle family is not gold, but knowledge. Those who seek fortune without wisdom shall be doomed to perish. You have been warned." A horrible screech filled the chamber. The vault began to shake, dust and debris raining from above. The golden treasures shimmered ominously, and then, one by one, they started to disappear. Eleanor stumbled backward. "The vault is collapsing." Henry, now frantic, grabbed at the piles of gold, but the treasures vanished beneath his fingers, turning to dust. Victoria yanked him away. "Forget the gold. We need to get out of here." Ethan scanned the chamber. The door was gone. "There's no way out," Eleanor whispered in horror. Then The whisper returned. This time, it spoke a single word. Blood. Ethan's heart pounded. The vault took blood to open. Maybe it requires blood to let us go. Henry paled. You mean a sacrifice? Nobody wanted to answer, but they all understood. A choice. Worth killing. For the air grew heavier, the vault closing in around them. The golden glow faded, replaced by an unnatural darkness. Time was running out. Eleanor clutched Ethan's arm. What do we do? Henry stepped back, his gaze flickering between them. Fear, panic, greed. Then he made his choice. With a sudden lunge, he grabbed Eleanor, yanking her toward the center of the vault. If someone has to die, he hissed, it won't be me. Eleanor screamed. Victoria reacted first, drawing a knife and slashing at Henry's arm. He let go with a snarl, staggering backward. Ethan seized the moment, grabbing Henry and throwing him to the ground. The vault wants a sacrifice, he said coldly. You were willing to make one. Maybe it should be you. Henry's eyes widened. Wait. Before he could finish, the vault responded. The ground beneath Henry split open. A black void yawned beneath him. He screamed, scrambling for purchase, but the shadows swallowed him whole. And then, silence. The vault stopped shaking. The golden light returned, and before them the exit reappeared. Victoria exhaled sharply, helping Eleanor to her feet. Ethan glanced toward where Henry had stood, but there was nothing left. No body, no blood, just emptiness. The final escape. As they stumbled out of the vault, the iron door sealed itself behind them, locking the secret away once more. Eleanor was shaking. Henry, he's gone. Victoria exhaled. He made his choice. Ethan looked back at the Carlisle vault, now lost to them forever. So did we. The manor above was silent when they emerged from the crypt. The storm had passed, the night eerily still. Arthur Kane was waiting for them in the parlor, his expression unreadable. I see you've returned, he said, with nothing. Ethan met his gaze. That depends on what you think we were looking for. Arthur nodded slowly. Then you understand. Victoria stared at him. You knew, didn't you, about the curse? Arthur gave a faint smile. Gregory Carlisle never cared about gold. He cared about legacy. The vault was never meant to enrich. It was meant to test. Eleanor's voice was hoarse. And Henry? Arthur's expression darkened. He was unworthy. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Arthur stood. The Carlisle estate will remain untouched. You may leave. Victoria scoffed. That's it? Arthur's lips curled into a knowing smile. That's everything. And just like that, it was over. Epilogue. A secret worth keeping days. Later, Ethan found himself staring out over the cliffs of Blackmoor, the manor behind him fading into the morning mist. They had survived. They had escaped. But as he looked at the small silver chain in his hand, the last remnant of the black box, he couldn't shake the feeling that some secrets refused to stay buried. The Carlisle vault was closed. But what if, someday, someone opened it again? As the wind howled across the cliffs, Ethan made his decision. Some treasures are never meant to be found, and some secrets are worth killing for. The end. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more stories like this, hit that like button and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And let me know on which topic you would like to see stories next. And check out these other stories you might enjoy. See you in the next one. Till then, take care and goodbye.